What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Thursday, December 14th, 2017 here. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer that phone, put you on the air with your comments and questions. So let's just get right on into it because there's a lot going on. Now, Roy Moore has issued a campaign statement. He is still refusing to concede, and apparently part of the complication, we had a caller who called in yesterday who said the military ballots had not arrived in time for the actual election. But according to the Secretary of State of Alabama, John Merrill, the overseas ballots can continue to come in until noon on December 19th. Now, this is a very, very close election. And it's close enough where it could easily trigger the state's automatic recount law. Now, of course, Doug Jones is out there saying it's time for Moore to move on. This is over and done with. Nothing's going to change. But it is very tight, and it's almost starting to remind me of Florida in 2000. With all the comments about confusing ballots and everything else that's going on here. Now, over at InfoWars, they got this video where Jones supporters were being interviewed on the air. And one of them made a bizarre comment saying, we came from different parts of the country to vote him in, and we got him elected. In fact, the direct quote was, he was asked, were you excited to see this victory? And the man answers, because we came here all the way from different parts of the country as part of our fellowship, and all of us pitched in to vote and canvass together, and we got our boy elected. Well, Alabama elections are not supposed to have anybody coming from outside the state to vote. And there's another story that's coming on around where apparently busloads of Democratic voters were brought into the voting stations. And nobody knows where those buses came from, but it was reported for 3 out of every 4 of the polling stations, buses full of Democratic voters were being brought in. Now, Newsweek is reporting on the thousands of felons that were registered to vote in the weeks leading up to the Alabama Senate election. And apparently, Pastor Kenneth Glasgow, who spearheaded the effort, said that on the November 27th registration deadline that they had registered something like 10,000 people statewide, former felons. So again, another dirty election. All right, let's grab ourselves a phone call. Jim in Chicago, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Michael, the thing that disturbs me today, and there are a lot of things, regarding what the FCC did and what this Congress is going to do when it comes to the tax bill, which is going to hurt middle-class America. I mean, what the FCC is doing, it sounds like we're going to be a banana republic pretty soon if we aren't there already.
Well, we're pretty much there already, and I was going to comment on the FCC's vote a little bit later in the show, and it was 3-2, very close. And I really had a problem with the comment made by the guy who was sort of moderating the whole thing, that this is a victory for consumers and entrepreneurs, and we're going to take the politicians out of the process. But no, this is a giveaway to the big ISPs who, as we reported yesterday, lavished something like $100 million all across the House and Senate to try and get their support. And so these ISPs are no longer going to be behaving like common carrier phone companies. They can be selective. They can deny access to traffic unless you're paying them. It means that all of these big internet companies like Spectrum will give the fast lane access to what they make money off of, and everybody else gets shoved over to the side. And I got to tell you, here in Hawaii, Spectrum internet is already abysmal. We pay for 300 megabits per second, and we're getting maybe 60. And I keep calling and complaining, and they keep saying, well, we know, we're working on the problem, blah, 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 blah.
Well, Michael, tell me this, though. How is it going to affect the average person like me, you, or anyone else when it comes to, paying our, cell bill or our telephone bill?
Well, I don't know about the telephone or the cell phone bill, but I expect what we're going to see is a change in the way Internet access is billed, where there'll be a tiered system. And Spectrum already does it. The low end is 60 megabits per second, which is what we're actually getting. And then for more money, you can have more access. And I think that situation is probably going to get a lot worse. Basically, it means that large corporations who've got money will have top access to the bandwidth, and small operations like independent media are going to get shut out.
Right. Now, is there anything that the average person can do? It sounds like the Congress was bribed again, and basically we're just not allowed to do anything.
It does sound like that, and yes, Congress was bribed. They're there to basically take donations, and in exchange for those donations, they'll do what the donor wants to have done. Unfortunately, that is the state of the nation today.
Right. Well, Michael, I'm going to let you go. You take care.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now then, getting on back to the Doug Jones, Roy Moore election, as soon as they announced Doug Jones had won, liberals hopped onto social media to basically attack all white people in the aftermath of the election result, which is weird because both candidates were white. But for some reason, they equate whiteness with Roy Moore, and Doug Jones, who is white, was apparently the darling of the blacks. And another incident on the same situation, not too long ago, Kentucky State Representative Dan Johnson was under investigation for alleged sexual molestation, and he committed suicide just yesterday, in fact. He denied the charges, was never charged criminally, but he committed suicide, and liberals got on social media cheering his suicide. Now, this guy was a father and a grandfather, along with being a state representative. And here's the thing. Have you noticed how liberals, if you say anything offensive or hurtful to them, they trigger? Oh, the snowflakes, we're offended. But they certainly don't hesitate to dish it back out the other way, do they? It's another one of those double standards. We can be mean and abusive and cruel to you, but you can't be mean and abusive and cruel to us, you know, or you're being racist, or you're being this, or you're being that. Now, things are getting very interesting in these hearings into what's been going on with the investigation into Trump. And Trey Gowdy is in full Gowdy mode, and he's just really pounding on these people. And what has now surfaced are these tweets, these texts between Peter Strzok and FBI lawyer Lisa Page. And an excerpt clearly shows that the Russia investigation was started before the election and was called as an insurance policy. In other words, Peter Strzok was going to make sure that if Trump won the presidency, he would be impeached and overthrown. Now, that very clearly is bias and conflict of interest. And I love the comment that Jim Jordan made about it, saying that Peter Strzok thinks he's James Bond. He's going to save the nation from inside the FBI. But clearly, this investigation was being political, and the goal of it wasn't to investigate a crime. The goal, as stated by Peter Strzok, was to find a way to get Donald Trump out of the White House if he won the election. So Trey Gowdy was out there roasting the Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein, saying, what the heck is going on here? Because he's pointing out that the reason you have a special counsel is because of conflicts of interest. And we don't like conflicts of interest because it undermines people's confidence in both the process and the result. And lo and behold, those that are supposed to make sure there are no conflicts of interest seem to have a bit of their own. And he's absolutely right. The whole reason for a special counsel is to avoid the entire Justice Department or the entire Congress from expressing their political biases. Special counsels are supposed to be objective and unbiased. And in this case, Mueller and virtually everybody that was on his staff were pro-Hillary and anti-Donald Trump. And now we have these tweets, these text messages from Peter Strzok, where they literally are admitting that this whole Russia investigation was a plan to find a way to get Trump out of the White House and reverse the will of the American people. So I think at this point, Trump would be fully justified in firing Mueller. Because after all these months, $7 million, they found nothing. They got a few indictments of some Trump associates for things completely unconnected to the campaign. They have come up short on anything that shows Russia had anything to do with the campaign last year. And by the way, Putin had a press conference earlier today in which he once again said, no, we don't do that. We don't need to do that. Now, over at Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton, the president there, is saying the question about what to do with all of this goes way beyond Robert Mueller. And the real question is it time to shut down the FBI? Because the FBI has been turned into a KGB-type operation by the Obama administration. And Fitton is a little off on that last one. It was a KGB-type operation going all the way back to COINTELPRO in the 1960s. But it's not about law enforcement. It's not about investigation. It's not about crime prevention. It's about enforcing the will of whoever is in power to cover up crimes by the elites, to harass people who want to get the truth out there. And he comes on out and says, you got to remember, Fusion GPS, which is now suspected of being a CIA front, was a Hillary Clinton campaign vendor. And the Department of Justice was working hand and glove with them, perhaps paying them money. We know that Hillary did, the DNC did, and the FBI did, and that is also connected to Peter Strzok. There was no barrier, no wall between the Clinton campaign and the Department of Justice and the FBI. It was just one big party politic machine. Now, somebody else who is facing tough questions from the House Judiciary Committee was FBI Director Christopher Wray himself. And basically the issue is about spying on the American people without warrants. And obviously the Fourth Amendment says that is not supposed to happen. But Director Wray basically was asked how many Americans had been spied on under what is called Section 702. Now, Section 702 was part of the FISA Amendments Act, and basically Section 702 is being used to violate the privacy guaranteed by the Fourth Amendment. Section 702 authorizes the acquisition of foreign intelligence information. However, the FBI holds the view that because Americans communicate with foreign persons outside the United States every single day, that all of our communications are being captured and read without a warrant. And Congress said, how many Americans have you spied on? FBI Director Wray refused to answer. Not the first time the FBI has withheld things from Congress, even though the House Judiciary Committee has oversight responsibility. Now, the other big scandal that's starting to percolate up is the Uranium One deal. And there was a comment by Senator John Barrasso saying that the Obama administration misled everybody on the Uranium One deal. They didn't have the details, including the fact that Russia was going to wind up with 20% of U.S. uranium. And the Nuclear Regulatory Commissioner, Christine Svinicki, responded to questions saying that, yeah, the Obama administration had not fully depicted the complexity of the transaction, which gave the Kremlin control of all that American uranium. So it was being rammed through, and the officials who were supposed to make that decision were being deceived by the Obama administration. Now, here's a story that's getting really interesting. Apparently, Fox News on the morning show today said that they have a contact that says there's an audio tape of the meeting between Bill Clinton and Loretta Lynch, and that we need to keep our eyes out for that. Now, maybe it's a real audio tape, or maybe Loretta Lynch and Bill got together and staged something talking about their grandkids, but we'll see what happens when it comes on out. Yet another issue that is dogging the administration is this big stink over this lady, Omarosa Newman, who was a former star on Donald Trump's show The Apprentice, and then she was hired as a White House aide. And yesterday, the White House announced that she will leave the Trump administration. Then she went on the news and said, no, she's not. And now the Wall Street Journal is saying that her departure was abrupt, describing her exit as confrontational. And apparently an unnamed White House official told the Wall Street Journal that Omarosa Newman was physically removed from the White House campus late Tuesday evening. So there was some kind of a big blow up there as well. All right, so let's get into the war zones here. There's a lot going on. Syrian army is preparing for an operation in Idlib, and basically the Syrian Arab Army and the National Defense Forces have established control over the hilltops of Al-Amar, Al-Majahan, and Al-Kazan inside the Beit Jin pocket in southern Syria. And so it looks like they're about to divide that pocket into two separate parts. And if this is done, the liberation of Mug al-Mir by government troops will just be a matter of time. Divide and conquer. We've all heard that phrase before. Now, there's an article that came out over at the Real News saying that Putin's Syria victory, and let's be honest, that's what happened. The U.S. wanted to take over Syria. Putin stopped them. But this story over at the Real News is saying the proxy war is going to continue and is probably going to ramp up in neighboring Lebanon. This is according to Syria expert and scholar Joshua Landis. So Syria is just mutating into another form of war, and Lebanon may be in the crosshairs. We certainly know Lebanon is in Israel's crosshairs. They still want that Litani River. Supporting that idea that Israel may go into Lebanon, apparently Israel's intelligence affairs minister Yisrael Katz, in an interview on Saudi media, threatened to attack Lebanon to prevent an Iranian military presence, which even some of Netanyahu's associates are saying doesn't really exist. But they're out there with the war talk saying they're going to attack Lebanon to prevent an Iranian military presence. Notice the word prevent. In other words, he's conceding there may not be an Iranian presence there at the moment. We're just going to bomb Lebanon just in case. So everybody is now piling on to Iran and making up all these stories about all the horrible things Iran is doing, and it's basically Saddam's nuclear weapons all over again. More lies to start another war. Meanwhile, up in Damascus, the militant groups and the Syrian government have started talks to end al-Nusra's presence in eastern Damascus. Al-Nusra appears to have sort of wound down, and they're thinking about leaving, and they're going to negotiate safe passages and make sure that nobody gets hurt on the way out here. Now, we're still dealing with the aftermath of Donald Trump's decision that he personally recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. It's caused a huge backlash all over the world. And it looks like the propaganda policy is to make it look like it's all the fault of those people who got upset. That Trump didn't do anything wrong, Israel's done nothing wrong. And so now the White House is accusing Abbas of preventing peace with criticism. In other words, the implied message is, if you want peace, you will never criticize anything Israel does. I'll tell you right now, that's a non-starter. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha America, welcome back to our show. Get out your paper and pencil if you haven't copied this address and phone number down before. It's Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number, especially if you want to become a continuing supporter, is 800-724-3700. 2719 extension 01. And apparently, getting on back to Omarosa, she was on Good Morning America this morning. She's denying that there was a big fight or stink at the White House when she was fired here. So he said, she said. Now then, apparently over in Turkey, 3 of their major political parties have issued a joint declaration regarding Jerusalem, calling on the Organization of Islamic Cooperation and all other countries to recognize East Jerusalem as the capital of an independent Palestine. Well, the OIC has already done that. They did that yesterday. And so this is not going away. Trump has bungled this horribly. And again, it appears that there was a failure of analysis because Trump clearly wasn't expecting this backlash, and neither was Netanyahu. I really think they assumed that if Trump said it was so, that the rest of the world would go along with it, and it didn't happen. Apparently, a prominent South African university is now boycotting Israel over the Jerusalem situation. And so the Council of the Tshwane University of Technology has resolved that the university will not forge any ties with Israel or any of its organizations or institutions. And they're calling for the end of the illegal occupation of the Palestinian territories. Now, the U.S. State Department is responding to the complaints from Palestine, or rather the complaints about Palestine, and certainly to the comment about how the United Nations should step in for a peace plan. And the State Department is saying, no, 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 the U.S. is still working on the peace plan. We're still going to be in charge of that. Well, nobody's going to listen to them. Israel will, because the U.S. gives Israel whatever they want. But Palestine has already said, we're not talking to you anymore over the peace issue. And the rest of the Mideast has said the United States is now thoroughly discredited as a peace mediator. Meanwhile, apparently, the Saudi newspapers are reporting Israel has invited Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to take over the peace negotiations between Israel and Palestine. And I don't think Palestine is going to go along with that one either. It should be at the United Nations. This should be an issue for the United Nations. This has gone on long enough, and it's time for the United Nations to grow a spine and deal with its rogue member, Israel. And I say that because of a couple of different things. First of all, Israel currently holds the all-time record for most UN resolutions passed against a country complaining of how they behave. And second, it must be remembered that Israel's membership at the United Nations carried with it 2 conditions. The first condition was a Palestinian right of return to all the homes and towns that they'd been displaced from during the creation of Israel. And the second condition was that if the Palestinians of their own free will chose not to return, that Israel would financially compensate them for their lost property. Israel has not complied with either one of those conditions. So, yeah, this should be at the United Nations. This should be put to the General Assembly. Going to the Security Council is a total waste because you're going to have Nikki Haley up there going, oh, veto, 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 veto. We must protect Israel. Always protect Israel. Veto, veto, veto. I think maybe it's time for Israel to get kicked out of the United Nations. I'm starting to think maybe the United States ought to get kicked out of the security, or at least lose their veto power. Stop being a permanent member, because they're abusing the system. Now, so many governments in the Mideast have now said they're not going to meet with Mike Pence, that Pence is now delaying his Middle East trip. They don't have a new date for it, but it basically looks like it would be a waste of time for him to go over there. Nobody wants to talk to him. Over in the town of Nazareth, which is traditionally held as the town where Jesus grew up, has now scrapped all their Christmas celebrations in protest over what Donald Trump has done. So, again, this issue is not going to go away. Trump has managed to seriously mess up our Middle East foreign policy. And maybe he just thinks we're going to go bomb them all anyway, so what does it really matter? But again, I got to tell you, I'm concerned about the lack of careful, well-thought-out analysis on any of these decisions being made. And again, I see it as a symptom of an impending Soviet Union-style collapse of the United States government. We're going to take a break for commercials. We got some callers waiting on the line, and we'll talk to them after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And before we go to the phone lines here, I have been informed that people who are calling the 800 number to make a donation need to go back to using extension 03. There was some confusion the other day where I'd been saying 03 all along. Then somebody told me 01, but it turns out that's not working. So it's, again, that 800 number is 800-724-2719, extension 03. Now, folks, it's Christmas time, and all of our hard-working technical staff at Republic Broadcasting have their little stockings up on the wall, and right now those stockings are empty. And you are the only ones who can put a little something into the Christmas stockings for the RBN staff. So it's the holiday season. Be a little bit generous here. All righty, we're going to start taking some phone calls. Tony in Puerto Rico, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Yeah, you have to give a lot of credit to President Trump. You know, he has a lot of cojones to declare that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. But my question is this. Do you think George H.W., if he had done the same thing, would have gotten away with it?
No, I don't think he would, and I think all those past presidents, because, I mean, Congress has voted to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel several times in the past, and it's been vetoed. Reagan vetoed it, because those other presidents understood that this was going to inflame the Middle East and complicate the issue of U.S. control over these oil nations that we are heavily dependent on. And so, you know, you can say Donald Trump has courage, yeah, but courage without brains to go with it, you wind up doing some very daring but dangerous things, and that's what's happened here. I really do not think Trump was expecting this backlash, but a careful analysis, talking to some experts, would have said, yeah, this will inflame the region. Hamas has already declared the third intifada, and Israel's bombing Gaza in response. There's going to be a lot of blood spilled over this, and it's splattered all over Donald Trump.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. And we're going to go to Ralph in New York. Aloha, Ralph. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I want to ask a hypothetical question. What's going to be the future of these sexual allegations that you see in Hollywood, the mainstream media, in corporate America? Now you're starting to see these actors. Now you're starting to see Tavis Smiley, another allegation about him, and you're starting to see Russell Simmons, and you see all these well-known public figures now. I mean, isn't there a statute of limitation on all these allegations, or is it just really a witch hunt?
Well, it's a witch hunt, and there are allegations, and in a lot of cases, they're not going to be true. And as I said before, Hollywood is a climate where there are so many people who are willing to trade their bodies for career advancement, and that's probably what lures a lot of these people into this kind of behavior. I mean, it's a wild town. I've got a few stories left over from my days in Hollywood I haven't even shared with Claire yet. So, you know, that's just what the environment is going to be like. But I think these things tend to come in surges. And just like the rape hysteria of the 1990s, it'll grab headlines for a while, and then people will get burned out on it. They'll develop fatigue, story fatigue, and they'll stop paying attention, right. And then the issue will basically vanish from the public eye, and things will go on as they did before. But right now...
You blame feminism for all this also, right?
I'm sorry?
You could blame feminism for the agenda is radically, or basically it's feminism. I believe that's the agenda also, right?
Well, feminism is to blame to a degree, because again, what we're hearing is what they're calling sexual assault today. In many cases, would have been called simply flirting in an earlier age. Now, obviously, when force is involved, that's over the line. But again, there are allegations, and we already know from Roy Moore that these allegations are often made up. I mean, that yearbook entry has been completely discredited, and they did the sexual allegations probably as a cover for the fact that they were going to steal the election. Because if they didn't have some way of damaging Moore or have something to blame his loss on, people were going to be looking at the numbers and saying this doesn't make sense. It's like that caller we had into the show from Alabama the other day who said everybody they knew was going to vote for Judge Roy Moore. And so this may have just been dreamed all up to basically say, well, he lost because of the sexual assault allegations. But again, polls were showing the vast majority of people in Alabama weren't giving those allegations any credence for a very simple reason. An allegation is not proof that anything happened. It's simply a claim.
You're starting to see more male-dominant corporate America that just they're saying the statistics that they just keep continue. They don't want to hire women in the workforce in this day and age because a lot of men are afraid of sexual allegations. They're afraid they actually go to the water cooler and just say hi to a woman nowadays.
Yes, you're absolutely right. This is actually going to harm career women's opportunities. Companies are not going to want to hire them because so many false allegations are used by women to get rid of competitors, to get rid of a boss they don't like. And I've personally known women who did things like that. So it is a reality. And
it's ruining careers, it's ruining professions that are predominantly males. And it's got to a point now where men are becoming so afraid just to say good morning to someone now. I mean, I see it here where I work on Wall Street. No, it's amazing.
It is. And there's always a long-term harm from any of this hysteria. And again, going on back to the rape hysteria of the 1990s, it had its burst in the media where women were crying rape all over the place, and then all of a sudden it turned out that rape was all of a sudden the second most falsely reported crime in the country, and a lot of innocent guys were having their lives ruined, some were put in jail, and some were fighting back and suing. In fact, down in San Diego, their entire Child Protective Service got shut down because the city couldn't afford the lawsuits that were coming in for constitutional violations. And in the long run, what happened, because of all the fraud and all the deception and the lies, police stopped listening to real victims. They didn't want to take a chance they were going to get caught up in another one of these rape hoaxes and be publicly humiliated or sued in court. And so in the long run, the rape hysteria actually harmed the genuine rape victims.
Wow. Wow. It's amazing. It's amazing, Mike. So I mean, and mainly among the young youth and the millennials today, they even so afraid to talk to women. I see it every day around me here in the corporate environment where I'm at in Lower Manhattan. I see it every day.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Okay, Mike. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, here is an interesting development that is going to provide some context for the current increase in friction between NATO and Russia, because newly declassified documents have come on out, was confirmed that in 1990, Western politicians repeatedly assured then-Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev that NATO would never expand east of Germany's borders. And then they broke that promise less than a decade later. And so that is the reason why Russia is very nervous Russia had a promise from the Western leaders that NATO was going to stop at Germany's border, and then they started pushing forward again. So who is the aggressor here? It isn't Russia, it's NATO. NATO broke their promises, and they're trying to expand eastward, certainly into Ukraine is an obvious one. And speaking of Ukraine, it may be on the verge of another Maidan. Now, we know that the original Maidan, the overthrow of Yanukovych and the installation of Poroshenko, was a classic U.S. regime change operation. But to the world and the people of Ukraine, it was all about bringing down a corrupt regime. And Poroshenko came on in with this promise to fight corruption. Unfortunately, the current government of Ukraine is even more corrupt than the previous one, and now the word is in the streets of Ukraine that it may require a new Maidan to take down Poroshenko's government and put in something that's actually going to work for them. So that could really blow up. All right, let's grab a phone call. Steve in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, you can use my last name since I have a show on the network now.
Okay, well, I try not to use last names because I don't want to bring any grief down on your head. Anyway, what can I do for you?
Not a problem. Not a problem. Hey, no, I was going to say about how John McCain always seems to win. It also helps quite a bit when you destroy the records right off the bat, the electronic record track,
Yes.
But, and there's no exit polling, so one of the easiest ways to steal an election is have no exit polling to find out how everybody voted. So it all worked out really well. I think this is the same scenario. No exit polling and destroying the records. I don't think John McCain has won an election in the last couple.
I hear that from people in Arizona. In fact, we just had House guests here that live in Arizona, and we were talking about that very issue. And they're saying the same thing we're hearing from the people of Alabama. Everybody they know was voting for the other guy, the one that ultimately lost. And at this point, after what we witnessed last year, it's time for Americans to realize our election system is totally corrupt. It is rigged. We managed through just sheer force of popular will to prevent Hillary from taking the White House last November. And look how everybody went into a panic and a tantrum over that. But we need to understand that the election system is rigged. And if we don't have honest elections, if we do not actually get to choose who's going to lead the nation, then we're not a republic, we're not a democracy, we're a banana dictatorship, if you will. And we're showing all the signs of it, the decayed infrastructure, and again, just like Ukraine, out of control corruption. And we're seeing a government that's constantly at war with itself, the Department of Justice and the FBI against Donald Trump. That's a very, very serious situation. And again, we saw a lot of the same things going on in the Soviet Union just before it collapsed.
Hey, another thing on this Beverly Nelson, who the forgery on the yearbook. Now, she should be prosecuted for filing a false statement. That's a prosecution waiting to happen right there.
There are a lot of prosecutions waiting to happen, but unfortunately, the fix is in. And Hillary should have been prosecuted. A lot of Hillary's people should have been prosecuted. But right now, only Republicans are being gone after by the system.
This whole sexual witch hunt going on, Michael, is going to put a real damper in the office place that you can't even make a comment that one of your female coworkers that looks nice today, she wore a nice dress. You can't make that comment she may just say, well, I think the way you said that was in a sexual tone. It's going to put a real damper in the office place and dating, for God's sakes.
Yes. It's one of the reasons why I'm glad I have such a happy marriage. I don't have to go through that nonsense. But again, these things are a matter of fashion, or let's be a little bit more honest, brainwashing. And the example I like to use, of course, is that when I was working in Germany back in the 1980s, the women in that office expected flirtation. They expected compliments. If you didn't say nice things about their dress and their hair and their makeup and everything, you would find your paperwork was getting mysteriously misfiled. They'd be very insulted and angry. today in the United States, because of feminism, women are being told that any comment by a man is basically a red warning flag that you're about to get attacked. And that's nonsense. Sometimes it's just conversation. Sometimes you're trying to be polite. How do you build a team out of a staff where you've got one half of them terrified of even talking to the other half?
Right. And we're not supposed to notice the breast augmentation either. They go out of their way to do the breast augmentation. We're not supposed to notice that either.
Well, you know, there was one incident at a studio in Los Angeles I was working at, and again, this was when this whole nonsense about feminism was really starting to crank on up. And there was a girl who worked there, and she was part of the technical staff. She wasn't front office, so there wasn't really a dress code. And she used to walk around basically in this very thin leotard and just waiting for a guy to make some kind of a comment at which she'd just scream at him. And fortunately, she didn't last there very long.
Hey, thanks, Michael. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open. Now, let's get on over to Iran. Everybody's dumping on Iran. Nikki Haley was out there with a pallet of broken-up hardware she insists is an Iranian missile that Yemen used, so forth and so on. It's Saddam's nuclear weapons all over again. It's the Lusitania not smuggling weapons to Britain all over again. It's the USS Maine and the Spanish mine all over again. That's how they get these wars going. So apparently, according to this story in news at antiwar.com, the United States is now planning to sanction Iran because of the worsening conditions in Yemen. Now let's back up here and take a look, because what we have here is Saudi Arabia acting as a U.S. proxy, going on in and bombing the heck out of Yemen. They're dealing with that cholera outbreak that may actually be a biological weapon attack. But we're going to say it's all Yemen's fault. It's all Yemen's fault. Rather, it's all Iran's fault. And we're going to sanction them. We're going to hit them with more sanctions. There's no logic to it whatsoever. It's just going after Iran for the sake of going after Iran. And I watched part of Nikki Haley's presentation, where she was presenting her irrefutable evidence that Iran was deliberately violating international obligations. And it was rather interesting to watch because there was no evidence. There was nothing but accusations without any proof whatsoever. And I remember listening to Nikki Haley's description of Iran and thinking that it actually was much better suited to describe Israel, which routinely violates their international obligations. And, of course, we know that the United States has walked away from treaties. We know that the United Nations was in violation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Act with regard to Iran. But I think this propaganda push against Iran is being run up because next month Donald Trump is supposed to recertify the P5+1 deal, and I don't think he's going to do it. I think he's going to decertify it in order to open the door to yet another war with yet another country who has not done anything to us. We'll be right back with a phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go to the telephones. Kevin in West Virginia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mr. Mike, when you wake up in the mornings, do you hear do-do-do-do-do-do? Just wondering.
What? No.
The Twilight Zone thing, you know, being crazy, you know.
No, I don't. And thank you for the phone call. All right. Now then, getting on back to the news. So everybody's piling onto Iran right now, and I think what they're telegraphing is that Trump is going to decertify the P5+1 deal and walk away from it. And that, of course, means that the U.S. can go back to screaming about Iran's non-existent nuclear weapons, just like they were screaming about Iraq's non-existent nuclear weapons as a prelude to outright war. And I think there should be a cautionary note here that, first of all, the U.S. did not come out on top in Syria. They don't want to admit it, but they failed to achieve their objectives there. And they're still having to garrison all of these countries that they've gone in and messed around with. And Russia has already said, if Iran is attacked, Russia will come in on the side of Iran. And I don't think we want to go to war with Russia. Now, Israel, of course, is swaggering all over the Middle East because they've got nuclear weapons that nobody's supposed to know about, but we all do. And all of the other Middle Eastern nations justly fear that. But if Russia gets involved, then all of a sudden Israel has to deal with the reality they could suffer a nuclear strike if they dare use their weapons. And there's another aspect of that as well. Israel has been lying about their nuclear weapons for decades. To go ahead and use one right now would basically remind the entire world that Israel has been lying about this all along. Would remind everybody that Israel isn't this weak little helpless nation, constantly terrorized and threatened by its Arab Muslim neighbors. And of course, the American people would be justly upset because it is against the law for our government to be sending U.S. tax dollars to any nation that has nuclear weapons that refuses to sign the Non-Proliferation Treaty and allow IAEA inspections. And I think people would say it's time for a refund. Now, getting on over to North Korea, Donald Trump is now talking about establishing a complete naval blockade against North Korea. And Pyongyang is saying it will take self-defensive measures against any blockade, as it considers such a move an act of war. And yes, a naval blockade is an act of war. Now, story coming out of shtfplan.com. President Trump's national security advisor is warning that now is the time to avoid a war with North Korea. H.R. McMaster was speaking at an event for the British think tank Policy Exchange and was basically saying, we've got to stop this now. All right, we've got to take a break for station identification. We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2 here. And I just got an email getting into this whole thing about hypersensitive snowflake women screaming sexual assault and everything. Probably not a good idea to be hanging up mistletoe around the office this year. Bad move. Bad move. And on that same comment, I've been watching this phenomenon of the so-called sex robots, these very realistic-looking robot women, and how they're very, very popular with men who can afford the price tag. And maybe part of that process is they don't want to deal with all the headaches of dealing with a real woman in this politically correct age. Anyway, just a thought. Let's take some phone calls here. Curtis in Nevada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I listen to your program on a regular basis, and I like to just try to chime in whenever I can think of something to contribute, but then I'll hear somebody bring up something that I'm still on, like when Ralph in New York talked about the feminist agenda. And from what I'm seeing now, this is beyond just a way to gain political election advantage, to have them vote. I think, to me, what we're seeing is a long-term shift. It's a deliberate shift, but it's kind of maybe spiritual too in a way, but that they want to create a matriarch-dominant society, okay, where the women will have pretty much the authority, and the only men that you'll see that have any kind of strength will be those that will enforce that authority upon men that are not compliant. See, honestly, I mean, that's a modern Amazon type of society is what they have in mind.
Well, we've heard that kind of talk going back to the original suffragette movement. But what's really interesting is that anthropologists have looked at very ancient societies and found out that they were actually matriarchal as well, because the women had the power to produce children. And they basically said, yeah, you got to do what I say or you don't get a kid. So there's been that battle back and forth on that very issue. I thought the whole point of the feminist movement, and certainly back in its early days when I was part of it, was everybody was going to be treated equally. But instead, the militant feminists, like you said, they want to reverse the order. They want to go
exactly.
Yeah. And that doesn't solve any problems.
Yeah, Mike. Right. You know, Mike, honestly, what I think we're going to see is that men are going to be required, maybe by mandatory classes, that they're going to have to be able to read the cues. And every interaction they have with any woman, until they get to know them, that they're going to have to know by the way she'll accept whether this is going to be like a social or even flirtatious or just strictly businesslike or a lady and gentleman situation. Men are going to have to be able to pick up on that. And I think it's going to have to be like a mandatory type of thing to learn.
Well, I don't think that can work simply because different women have different cues. And that's where a lot of the misunderstanding is going to come on in. Right.
You know, you make the point about how this came out in the 90s and people just got tired of it. Maybe so, but the people then were the people that were raised in the 60s and 70s. Now, 10 years from now, the prominent population age will be people that were raised in the 80s and 90s. They're going to go right along. They're conditioned for it.
No, they're not going to.
That's my
No. What happens is each succeeding generation tends to flip to the opposite of what their parents were thinking. The hippie generation, for the most part, led to the generation of the highly materialistic kids, and probably that next generation will flip back to thinking materialism isn't all that important. And so these things tend to oscillate. When the parents try and raise the kids a certain way, they'll rebel and they go the other way. So I don't think it's going to be permanent. I think history has shown these, again,
I disagree.
Like the original witch hunts. So after a while, everybody got sick and tired of them and it went away.
Yeah, I disagree because those people were raised from the 1975 on. You went to school. They conditioned you on relativism and progressive globalism. I mean, it's pretty hard to bounce back because it's a whole new different thing. That's never happened before. I don't see that happening. I see these people are going to comply. It's a whole new age.
I don't think so. I mean, history is.
I hope not.
History is full of instances where the repression of a people, the control of a people, reaches a flashpoint, and all of a sudden there's a reaction. Whether it's the French Revolution, the Romanian Revolution, the American Revolution, I think you can't basically condition a population to think a certain way forever. The liberals like to believe that, but again, liberalism is based on an intellectual hoax. Margaret Mead's book, Coming of Age in Samoa. Anyway, Curtis, the phone lines are filling up here, so we're going to let you go, and we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. So let's go to Joe in Rhode Island. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. About 3 or 4 weeks ago in the Rhode Island paper, the main paper, they put an article about China sending up satellites just recently with delivery systems on them. Do you know anything about these delivery systems, and can you tell me about them?
Well, I think what they're trying to imply is that China is deploying some kind of weapons into space as part of the run-up to war with China. China puts up a lot of satellites that have very benign purposes. Right now, there are international treaties against weaponizing space, and mostly it's the United States that's in violation of that. But I've heard nothing about this, and it sounds to me like more China-bashing propaganda. But what they're talking about is called a fractional orbit bombardment system, where they'll have these things in orbit and they can deorbit at some other part of the globe. Again, it was something that was postulated all the way back during Reagan's Star Wars initiative. But I don't think China is doing that. It's very expensive to do that. And with the ground-based telescopes that are able to see exactly what a satellite is doing, I think there would be some proof of what's going on there. And we have one of those satellite photography systems here in Hawaii, down on Maui, on the top of Haleakala. And it's basically a collection of telescopes that are optically linked to have a very high resolution, and it's paired with the Maui Supercomputer Center that it processes the images. And I got to see some of those, and it is amazing the detail that they can get as they photograph the satellites going overhead.
That's Mike, and a face-off between U.S. and Iran. Who do you think China would side with on that one?
I think China would probably follow Russia into the fray. Right now,
really?
we're not as useful to China as we used to be. We don't have the money to buy their manufactured goods. China is going to go where their wallet says to go, and that is going to be to places where the economy is growing. And I think, certainly judging from the reaction to Trump's announcement about Jerusalem, I think the rest of the world is getting pretty fed up with the U.S. throwing its weight around.
How about, what's that country? The large Arab country that's very, very in the north. I forgot the name of it. Turkey. Who would they side with at this time?
They seem to be pivoting away from the United States because of that botched coup attempt in 2016. And they're certainly one of the most vocal critics of Trump's announcement on Jerusalem. So I think we could see the entire Middle East, backed up by Russia and China, united against Israel and the United States. The one nation that might stick with Israel and the U.S. might be Saudi Arabia, but I think if Crown Prince bin Salman, or King bin Salman, were to go that way, he might face a revolt from within his own country.
Okay, Mike, thanks a lot.
All right, thank you. We're going to switch over to James in Tokyo. James, thank you for waiting so very patiently. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Michael.
Hi.
Hi. Sexism is a very big problem in the world. That's why with everybody now, it's coming out. Everybody is being accused of sexual harassment, to complimenting a hairdo, and that's why people have to be more like me, where I don't believe in sex before marriage, and I'm not too sure about afterwards, Michael. And actually, Japan is a very sexist society.
Yes.
Not just like in employment ads, where they'll put an ad in for a woman specifying the age, for example, 18 to 22 or 22 to 26. But for men, it's been very difficult. For example, if you go into a Japanese woman's house, they have a genkan, which is the doorway. They'll take your shoes off. By the time you step into the apartment, they already put a whiskey in your hand, giving you a foot massage. Then they ask you if you need a back massage. And then they ask if they can make you a bath, and if you need any assistance in the bath, washing your back and stuff. This is the terrible stuff that I've had to go through for 27 years, and I think I'm going to open up a crowdfunder site for abused men like me, where we can have a safe space, a bunch of therapists, some Play-Doh, and maybe a couple puppy dogs that we could hold and make us feel better.
My heart bleeds for you.
Anyway,
all right, James, thanks an awful lot for the phone call, and we're going to let you go there. Getting on back to the news here, getting on back to North Korea. Now, according to J. Michael Springman, who's a former U.S. diplomat in Saudi Arabia, his concern is that if the U.S. attacks North Korea, the situation could rapidly escalate, destroying South Korea, Japan, maybe parts of the United States, and the fighting could spread into China. And it would just spin it totally out of control. It is something to be avoided. And outside of the opium in North Korea, I'm having a hard time understanding why we're even bothering. Because Kim Jong-un is building his nuclear weapons and his missiles as a deterrent. He's not going to use them. He's not going to throw away something that brings peace to his land. And it has to be remembered, with all this screaming by the U.S. government about Iran's nukes and North Korea's nukes and Iraq's nukes and everybody else's nuclear weapons, it is only the United States government that has ever actually used a nuclear weapon of mass destruction against the civilian population of another country. So if nuclear weapons are bad and we want to get rid of them, let's start with the country that's actually used them. All right, now, China is apparently upset at the United States over the issue of Taiwan because Donald Trump has crossed a very old but still relevant red line with China. He signed this year's National Defense Authorization Act, which includes a provision saying that the U.S. reserves the right to conduct joint naval exercises with Chinese Taipei, which is another name for Taiwan. And China has never recognized the regime in Taipei and views any interaction with Taipei as a threat to their geographical integrity. So it's a very tense situation. And to sort of underscore their ire, apparently China sent bombers and fighter jets to fly around Taiwan in a drill. H-6K bombers and Sukhoi 30 and J-11 fighter jets basically went on out and flew around Taiwan to send a message. But it just seems like Donald Trump is doing all these things that are just bringing the world closer and closer to a global conflict, which I don't think this country can win, even if it goes nuclear, especially if it goes nuclear. Nobody wins in a nuclear war. Now, the Rohingya crisis is continuing. Apparently, 6,700 Rohingya Muslims were killed in just 1 month, according to Doctors Without Borders. And so that situation is just escalating to the point where basically it's genocide. It's ethnic cleansing that's going on. Meanwhile, over in Southern California, and you would almost think they would put these assets to work on the wildfires, but, you know, fires may come and fires may go, but wars go on forever. There's a major war game exercise deploying a battalion-sized air, sea, and ground assault playing out on Marine Corps bases in Southern California this week. This exercise includes more than 1,000 Marines from the 1st Marine Division and more than 600 Marine aviators and their crews, and they're operating at San Clemente Island, Marine Corps Air Station Miramar, Camp Pendleton, and the Marine Air Ground Combat Center at 29 Palms. Now, these are all established Marine bases, and exercises go on there all the time. But this one that is combining all these bases and working together, they're calling it Winter Fury. This is the first such exercise in more than a decade, dealing with the size and complexity that was going on there. All right, let's take another phone call. Kelly in Georgia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I'm sorry if you covered this already in the first hour, but we just tuned in here for the second hour. I'm curious about this whole net neutrality thing. I don't really understand a whole lot about it, but my 15-year-old and 23-year-old are just up in arms. But I feel like I remember a couple of years ago that everybody was upset before they did the whole net neutrality thing. And so I can't figure out if this is something that's really that bad. It seems like it's going to now be returned to the free market. But I just wanted to see if you could explain it a little bit and get your opinion on where you stand on it all.
Okay, well, net neutrality as a concept is the idea that every Internet service provider has to carry every other Internet service provider's traffic on an equal basis. And it comes out of something that was called common carrier, because this was an issue when they broke up the Bell Telephone Company as a monopoly and started the regional telephone companies, the baby bells. And people wanted a guarantee that the phone call that they were making from one of these phone companies was going to reach the destination in an area covered by another phone company transiting through wires that were owned by a third telephone company. So the common carrier concept was established at that point, which is why the breakup of Ma Bell wasn't more confusing than it actually was. So it's always been applied to the Internet since its earliest days as the ARPANET. And what caused the big ruckus was the suggestion that common carrier not apply to the Internet to allow the ISPs to have more control over the traffic passing through their system. And the concern was that the ISPs would start playing favorites. It wouldn't be equal bandwidth for all, that the ISPs would give the lion's share of the bandwidth to large corporate customers, and everybody else would have to deal with less bandwidth and just sort of get shoved over to the corner. And that's what people were upset about back during the Obama administration. And the ruckus was so bad, that's why Obama passed his rules for net neutrality to maintain that common carrier. It's one of the few things he did that I agreed with. What the FCC did earlier today was they ended the Obama rules guaranteeing net neutrality. And they're trying to present this, that this is a victory for the consumers and entrepreneurs and so forth. But it's a giveaway to the ISPs, where they can now preferentially provide their product to you and scale back product coming from competitors, and in a way open the door to filtering and censorship. So I'm in agreement with your kids. What the FCC did today was a very, very bad thing. We have to take a break here for commercials, and thank you for the phone call, Kelly. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha America, welcome back to the show here, and I'm watching on the corporate media feed here, and apparently this former Apprentice star turned White House aide, Omarosa, is still denying that she was fired, and she's going around saying she has a story that the world will want to hear. And so I'm wondering if this is going to be the opening salvo in this attempt to bring Trump down with a flood of sexual assault, harassment allegations, because we've been hearing grumblings that this was in the works. So this is an ugly time in American politics, and Fox News just teased with a story, breaking news regarding the email scandal, so we'll have to keep an eye on that one. All right, let's take another phone call here. Daniel in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Yeah, I wanted to get right into it's the 5-year anniversary of Sandy Hook.
Yes.
I was one of those researchers that was all digging for months and months after this event. Don't know why there was a few Canadians that were involved, and we did quite a good job of asking some pretty good questions that are still unanswered. So I just thought I'd a little bit of things in point form I want to relate to your audience.
Okay.
If your child died, you'd be a babbling mess with swelled up eyes for a week. But these parents were out giving interviews stating that they had closure, were forgiving of the shooter, and seemed more concerned about changing gun laws than their own privacy. Curiously, almost all the parents were very proficient public speakers. And I know you've been in broadcasting a long time.
Yes.
And it's not an easy to do.
Did you ever see that one video? There was this video of this guy who was supposed to be the father of one of the dead children, and the unedited version leaked out. And it shows him coming on out to be interviewed, and he's laughing and joking. And then you see him go through this exercise to sort of bring himself down and make himself look upset. It's an acting exercise. Anybody who's ever been involved in acting recognizes that method. And to me, that was the dead giveaway that this was all another staged hoax.
Exactly. There's nothing that's, a smoking gun, and a lot of the naysayers say, oh, well, what proof do you have? And it's a lot of little things. It's circumstantial things. Why were porta potties ordered to the school afterwards instead of medevac helicopters, which weren't even alerted when the first accounts of victims from an active shooter event were flooding the 911 dispatch. There's a lot of Photoshop pictures of the alleged victims. Anyone can Google this. These are all from Reuters, AP, so they're not like, some guy in his mom's basement. Adam Lanza, the shooter, had a computer club photo, and if you reverse that photo, it's exactly the same as his driver's license. There's pictures of some of the victims with shadows in multiple directions, longer arms than humanly possible. One of the questions was, who cleaned up the blood from the 26 victims? And Lieutenant Vance of the Connecticut State Troopers was asked, he oversaw the investigation. They asked which company the biohazard containment contract was given to, and his response was, what blood? Now, another researcher I know had tried to find out what company in Connecticut, in that area, in that area,
Daniel, I'm sorry to cut you off. We're coming up on a commercial break, and I have a couple of responses. First of all, in this day and age, the burden of proof is not on we the people. It's on the government. Whenever they make any claim on TV, the burden of proof is on them. Prudence says we should not trust them. These are the people who lied about Saddam's nuclear weapons, and there are huge problems with Sandy Hook. One of the most important and easiest to document is the fact that the school was not actually a working school at the time this whole thing went down. Internet records prove it. Looking at the condition of the school itself at the time, Wolfgang Halberg makes this point. There were broken railings and all kinds of mold. That would not have been allowed to be the case in a school where children were actually going to study. So that really...
I'll be over to
Sorry, go ahead.
To the break?
No, I got to get on to other things here. So you got about 40 seconds.
Yeah, I had a couple more things, but... Okay. No fingerprints or DNA from the alleged shooter found on any of the weapons or the magazines duct taped together. Parents not allowed to identify their own children's remains, and they said they were perfectly fine seeing photographs of their own children instead of seeing them in person. And anyone would want closure, or at least you wouldn't be able to drag someone away from that. But they were apparently fine from that. I guess there's another thing about the dash cam video that was released with the cops eating Doritos on the hood of their car and allegedly seeing 26 victims all massacred. I mean, it just doesn't add up.
No, it never added up. And like I said, that one video of the supposed father laughing and joking before his actual interview starts, that was the giveaway for me. Okay, Daniel, we got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and I'm watching on the Fox News feed here. And apparently the new information on the FBI's investigation of Hillary Clinton's emails relates to some of the information that has surfaced looking at Peter Strzok. Peter Strzok, his text indicated a bias, an institutional bias, in favor of Hillary Clinton, opposed to Donald Trump, and apparently now there's been a linkage going on back to former FBI Director James Comey, and so all of a sudden the issue is, was he trying to help Hillary Clinton when he did that little statement of laws that had been broken and then said, we're not recommending charges, which was overstepping his bounds. That's not the FBI's job. Well, to those of us out here watching, yes, it was very obvious that James Comey and Loretta Lynch were trying to help Hillary Clinton, and there should be a special counsel on that one. Now, getting on back to news regarding war, apparently over in Oklahoma near the Kansas border, people are very, very concerned because the Department of Homeland Security is set to release what they say are inert chemicals into the atmosphere near an abandoned school in Newkirk, Oklahoma. And they're trying to gauge how the chemicals travel through the air and whether they could infiltrate buildings and homes where people were seeking shelter in the event of a biological attack. Now, they're saying it's to provide some kind of a defense and save lives. You know, duct tape and plastic or something. It looks to me like they're developing an offensive capability. But the issue here is these people living in the area are very concerned that they're going to be used as laboratory rats. and they're not sure how far they can trust the Department of Homeland Security that the chemicals are inert and harmless. And that's actually based on history, because many years ago there was a biological weapons test over San Francisco, and what they did is they released what they thought was a very mild illness into the air, and then they were simply going to keep track of records at clinics and hospitals to see how many people came in with this specific illness. Unfortunately, it turned out the strain that they released was a little more potent than they thought, and some deaths resulted. And it is alarming to realize that it is legal for the government to test biological weapons on us all. And they have done it many times. Now, here's another story and another reminder where if you have children of military age, you might want to share this with them. And it goes back to this incident in 1966 when a B-52 carrying 4 hydrogen bombs collided with a KC-135 tanker over the Mediterranean. And the crew was killed. The bombs were lost. They were eventually recovered. In fact, Dr. John Craven, who was living here on Oahu up until his death, was part of the team that hunted those bombs down. He's a very amazing man here. But the issue here is that some of the bombs had broken open on impact. None detonated, obviously. But the U.S. veterans who were assigned to clean up the mess after that came down with radiation-induced illnesses, and the Veterans Affairs just ignored them. You know, these things happen. So right now there are these Yale Law School students have requested a U.S. court to permit a class action lawsuit on behalf of the U.S. Air Force veterans who responded to that disaster, but who've been denied disability benefits. And I hope they get it. I mean, the military has a very callous attitude toward veterans. You know, when you can be trained and sent on out to do the dirty work, they'll spend a lot of money on you. But once you're no longer able to go on out and be useful, they just drop you. Another good example would be in the days when there were still above-ground nuclear tests going on in Nevada, there was one test where they wanted to simulate exploiting a breach in the enemy lines from a tactical nuclear warhead. So they got a bunch of soldiers out there in the desert, and they set off this bomb, and the only protection they gave these soldiers was sunglasses. And they said, you know, march into the aftermath of the explosion, get to the rear of the imagined enemy lines and fan out, see how quickly you can take control. The soldiers did what they were ordered to do, and of course they came down with cancers and leukemias, and the government pretty much ignored them as well. Meanwhile, over in Norway, they have really gone down the path of equality, and they have been allowing women to join the military in combat roles. And after doing that, they have realized that having women in these squads actually undermines the Army's fighting ability. They're less effective combat units when they're co-ed. Can't fight reality. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Roxanne in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi.
Hi.
I wanted to just follow up on that one caller, I believe in Canada, about the Sandy Hook, for example.
Yes.
If you just go to, for any of these hoax shootings, you can go right to these sources, the AP image page, and type in whatever incident you want. For example, I got one here. I did tons of them for like Fetzer and all these people, but anywho, for example, one's dated, the creation date was November 6th at 3:57 a.m. And then they submitted it on the 10th. Didn't that happen like on 12th or something? But you can find it for all of these events, Brussels, Paris, all of them. And that's their own sources. So, and then in the Florida, what was that, nightclub, Pulse?
Yes.
I found 17 of those supposedly 54 dead, all had multiple arrests. So play the role, you get off free. That's it. Thank you.
All right. Thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. And again, nothing new with any of this. Hoaxes are what the government uses to keep you under their control. And again, going back to the FBI, which is getting a long overdue and well-deserved grilling, during COINTELPRO, one of the things that they set up to discredit the anti-Vietnam War movement was a riot at the Disneyland theme park in Anaheim. And the way they set it up is they had their undercover informants on Southern California colleges and universities, and yes, every college and university has undercover FBI informants. Get used to the idea. And they organized what was supposed to be a peaceful march along Harbor Boulevard, which runs alongside the Disneyland park. So the day comes and they all get down there and they're off their buses and they're walking back and forth, and the organizers, meaning the undercover informants, start saying, they're not paying attention, they're not paying attention, let's go inside. And basically led the people inside, got them all riled up, jumped the turnstiles, went on in, and just created a huge ruckus. They were smoking pot on Tom Sawyer Island. They were rough with the costume characters. And, of course, the media was there to photograph it, along with the National Guard. And the next day, every newspaper in the country, pictures of the anti-war protesters roughing up Mickey Mouse. And in a stroke, completely discredited the anti-war movement. Because obviously they're not very peace-loving if they're out there being violent on Disneyland. And all of this came out during the congressional hearings into COINTELPRO in the 1980s. Another hoax they did was the famous Black Panther coloring book to try and sever relations or increase racial tension between blacks and whites. That was another fake. So as I was telling that first caller, Daniel, if somebody comes on up and says, well, how can you prove that there was a hoax? And you just reply, how can you prove that it happened the way the government is telling you? And they'll say, well, it's the government that's telling me that. And then you say, same government that told you Saddam had nuclear weapons. Americans are the most lied to people on the face of the earth. And you need to understand and accept that in order to develop a healthy degree of skepticism, especially with more and more of the same bovine excrement being poured all over us to get a war going in North Korea and in Iran and possibly Lebanon and who knows where all else. So let us talk now about the economy. The Federal Reserve has raised interest rates to the highest in a decade. And this is going to have repercussions. We might see a correction on the stock market because the stock market is being driven to record highs by the availability of very inexpensive money. So these brokerages can borrow the money, buy the stock, and then they hope somewhere down the road they'll sell the stock at a profit. They'll pay back the loan to the bank with the interest, and there'll be enough left over for a healthy profit for themselves. But now that margin of profit is being shaved off here. Over in Scotland, there's a little bit of an upset because Nicola Sturgeon is now pushing for what she calls a tartan tax. And that's basically a penny on income tax for earnings over £24,000 a year. And claiming only the wealthiest pay more, but she's drawing flack because she had campaigned originally on a promise not to raise taxes. But then all politicians say that. And then you get whacked upside of the wallet. Like this GOP tax plan bill. They've even quit trying to claim it's going to lower taxes for the middle class. The only ones getting the tax cuts and the tax breaks are the rich corporations and individuals. And taxes on everybody else, middle class, working class, are going to go up. Now, Delta Airlines has chosen Airbus over Boeing in this $12 billion jet deal. This according to Bloomberg. And that is really going to hurt the economy out there in, every state where Boeing has a plant, certainly out in Washington State here. Meanwhile, Iran Air is getting ready to buy some Boeing jets, so that's good news for Boeing. And Iran Air is considering financing it wholly inside Iran, domestic financing. And apparently Boeing has even said that they would carry some of the credit on the aircraft as well. People are trying to get away from that global private central bank lending system, the debt trap here. Speaking of debt traps, nearly 5 million Americans are currently in default on their student loans because the money junkies took education and they turned it into a scam. When you look at some of these snowflakes running around, they're not being educated. They're being indoctrinated. And even worse, they are not emotionally prepared to deal with the real world. And they all got these student loans to go to college because I want to have a college degree on the wall. It means so much. These days, no. Because those high-paying jobs that you were promised would be waiting for you when you graduated, they're not there. They've all been shipped off overseas. And so these students are coming on out of these colleges with these incredibly high student loan payments and low-paying jobs, which is why so many of them are still having to live with their parents. Now, getting on to Bitcoin, everybody's talking about Bitcoin here. Bitcoin is now officially the biggest bubble in world history. And a lot of people are saying it's time to take your profits out of there. But my concern is there's nothing propping up the value of Bitcoin. It's pure speculation. It's not an investment. It's being driven by speculation, which is why I keep saying I smell tulips out there. I think there's going to be a major, major crash of Bitcoin. I don't know when, but it does feel like it. Now, BHP Billiton is the world's largest mining company, and they have just decided to exit the shale energy industry entirely. And apparently, BHP Billiton has asked 4 investment banks to assist in either selling or spinning off its underperforming U.S. shale oil and gas assets. So here's the problem. Everybody came on out and said, you know, fracking's going to be great. There's all kinds of oil and gas down there. We'll get it out easily, and it'll be wonderful. But every one of those fracking fields has not produced the amount of oil and gas that was predicted. The Monterey Shale Formation, they've already cut the estimate by 2/3 of what's really down there. And along with that, of course, we've got all the downside of fracking, which is methane bubbling up through lakes, ponds, and streams and killing the fish, methane bubbling up in our tap water, all kinds of toxic chemicals leaking back up those pipes. That toxic fracking fluid, some of which is radioactive and carcinogenic, a lot of it is just toxic waste they can't think of any other way to get rid of. It doesn't stay down in the ground. It works its way up. And apparently there's been a new study that shows women living near these fracking wells are having smaller babies than average. So there may be some infliction of harm on the young ones as well. So we've got all that downside and no upside. And now the companies that put us in this mess, they're bailing. They're getting on out of it. Now, as you know, Greece is in serious economic hardship. And one of the things that they're looking at to try and deal with that is the fact that Germany owes Greece 185 billion euros in World War II reparations. And apparently, German researchers are confirming that. It was based on, in large part, on a forced loan. When Germany occupied Greece, they forced the government to loan Germany some money that was never repaid, and it's been accruing interest ever since. Now, Berlin is saying we reject any claims of World War II reparations, which again is a double standard because Germany agreed to reparations for Israel. The first 3 Dolphin-class submarines Germany gave to Israel as war reparations. But the Greeks don't count. The Greeks don't count on that one at all. So that's going to be a bit of a fight. Getting on over to Great Britain, Theresa May has suffered a major setback because apparently conservative rebels in the House of Commons backed an amendment to the European Union withdrawal bill granting Parliament a meaningful vote on the Brexit deal. In other words, forget the will of the British people. If Parliament decides that they don't want to go along with Brexit, Brexit will be over and done with. So the globalists are trying very hard to glue their little fantasy planet, their utopia, back together. And along that line, the European Union is now suing Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic for refusing to accept any more Islamic migrants. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're getting more information about this sudden breakthrough on the FBI's investigation of Hillary Clinton's email server. Tucker Carlson is now reporting that apparently the FBI forced a government watchdog agency to sign a non-disclosure agreement that it would not share information about Hillary's email with Congress. Now that shows the FBI actively sabotaging Congress and their oversight authority. That's really big. This gets back to Tom Fitton at Judicial Watch saying the question isn't really about what to do about Robert Mueller, but whether the FBI ought to be shut down. They aren't really a benefit to the American people. They're not the swell bunch of Joes you see in movies like The FBI Story or Silence of the Lambs or various TV shows. That's all crafted propaganda to make you think they're wonderful people. The Nazis did the same thing. There was all kinds of propaganda to convince the German people that the Gestapo was working for them, that the Gestapo was protecting them. Now, getting on back to Europe here. As I mentioned before the break, the European Union is suing Poland, Hungary, and Czech Republic for refusing Islamic migrants. Apparently, back in 2015, the European Union demanded that 160,000 refugees be distributed throughout most member countries of the EU. And it's another reminder that the European Union is rapidly moving away from being a union into being a dictatorship, because more and more the authority of the sovereign member nations is being eroded. Now, so many migrants are flooding into these European nations, it's distorting the economy. And over in Sweden, 6 out of their 8 parliamentary parties are now in agreement that the national age of retirement needs to be raised from 61 to 64 years in order to deal with the increase in migrants and the fact that it is straining the economy. And retirement is going to be that much harder for the government to provide. Now, down in Australia, it seems that they too are going down the road of fascist dictatorship. And apparently they're looking at a new law that will punish whistleblowers and journalists who leak classified documents with up to 20 years in prison. And as we've learned through bitter experience here in the United States, very often documents are classified not to protect important national secrets, but to protect careers of important politicians. Now, right now, there is a gun bill in Congress called the Concealed Carry Reciprocity Law. It's already been passed by the House of Representatives, and it's heading for the Senate, and gun owners are saying, great, concealed carry everywhere. But there is a problem, which I will share with you after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're talking about this gun bill. It's passed the House of Representatives, heading to the Senate. It's a concealed carry reciprocity law, which basically says that if you have a concealed carry permit in your home state, other states that you travel to will have to respect that. And gun rights advocates are saying this is a good thing. But the problem is there are a lot of additions to the bill that people weren't paying attention to. And there was a last-minute change that could substantially increase the number of Americans that are banned from buying guns at all. And if it's passed, things like having an unpaid traffic ticket could prevent you from having a gun, which I think is just silly. So they're trying to get this gun bill passed and make it look like it's something that's good for gun owners, but in reality, it's very, very restrictive. Now, taking a step back to the breaking story about the FBI and the investigation into Hillary's email server, apparently over at the Wall Street Journal, columnist Kimberly Strassel is saying that Mueller, the Justice Department, and the FBI are not helping the lawmakers' probe of Fusion GPS and the Trump dossier. That's obstruction of justice. And so is that non-disclosure agreement that the FBI had a watchdog agency sign saying they would not share information with Congress. That's obstruction of justice. So this is getting really serious here. And this is what the corporate media ought to be reporting on. And, of course, you know, applause for Tucker Carlson for getting it on out there. But it's starting to come apart. Let's take a phone call now. Mateus in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hey, Michael. I have a few things. One, I was wondering, when do you think would be appropriate to change the name from Washington Compost to Washington Post-Mortem?
As soon as the money runs out.
Yeah, it's getting there. And I can't help but notice this really glaring connection between this whistleblower 20-year story and then the Hillary Clinton story, and they're both related to classified documents going places that they shouldn't. It's like, wait a second, because it's so close. Like, can't we see that, oh, okay, this, so are we going to put Hillary away for 20 years? Anyway.
Well, they're not going to put Hillary away for 20 years. The Clintons, and for that matter the Bushes, are protected by the Central Intelligence Agency because Hillary has already made it clear. If she goes down, she's going to take as many people down with her as she possibly can. And I'm sure that she's got her dead man switches set up all over the country so that nothing unfortunate would happen to her. But that's why everybody's trying to protect the Clintons, because what they're really protecting is that narcocracy at the heart of our government. And it's a very, very difficult position for them to be in, having to go along with Hillary. You would think somebody who had that kind of involvement in something that nefarious would want to keep a low profile, but the Clintons have never been that way. So no, there'll never be an arrest. The worst that might happen is that the Clintons might decide to retire to some country without extradition. But I'm not expecting to see Hillary get arrested. What I would like to see happen is for the IRS to revoke the tax-exempt status of the Clinton Foundation because it doesn't meet the requirement of being a tax-exempt charity. They didn't spend the necessary percentage of their wealth on truly charitable causes. And that would make the Clintons personally liable for all of those accumulated taxes.
Yeah, they have to spend 51%. They've spent more like 3 to 5%.
Yes.
Just my last point here is my theory that the deep state, whatever that is that we're referring to, is nonpartisan. That's the theory I've got here. And they are pulling a lot of the levers and strings of rigging the elections. And because they're nonpartisan and because part of their objective is to uphold this illusion of democracy so that we don't riot in the streets and demand democracy, they make sure that if the Democrats get into too much trouble, that they don't get completely destroyed. They rig elections. They put in some senators that shouldn't be there, you know. So when we're seeing these rigged elections and these questionable situations where, oh, wow, a surprise miracle, a Democrat takes over a Republican election, and it's obvious election fraud, it's that same theory that they don't want any one party to be destroyed because then we're going to be like communist, like red communist China or red communist Soviet Union, and then they're worried that we're not going to put up with that. So
no, we wouldn't because, Nazi Germany was a one-party country as well. I think there's another mechanism you need to be aware of. The deep state, the narcocracy, thrive in the darkness. They don't want to be seen. And so as a result, they're not out there trying to control absolutely everything that's out there. They only come on out and exert influence when they feel they really need to make a change. And I think what's going on with our election system is the deep state, the narcocracy, are for the most part willing to let senators and representatives fight it out for the elections, and they just wait to see who wins, and then they compromise that winner. In the case of what happened down in Alabama, I think this was fully a Democratic operation. It smacks of the same tactics we saw Hillary using last year to get rid of Bernie Sanders. And so it's a multi-level power structure. And we only see up to the level of president, and we don't see the levels above that because they don't want to be seen.
Well, the people that are counting the votes, I don't really think that's Hillary counting the votes or any one particular corrupt politician. That's more of like a larger conspiracy, a larger control, deep state, centralized. The people that are somehow have managed to control the electronic voting mass, like central switch through crossover computers where they can actually fudge everything. Those are the people that are rigging the elections. And to me, that's more like, they've got the large view of like, don't let this turn into a one-party country because then we won't be able to have the solution. But anyway, that's the theory. And just the last thing about what you were saying about we're allowed to be tested on with biological, what is wrong with us? Like, why are we not surrounding all of our local government buildings peacefully, demanding that law to be changed? Why we should be having mass protests? We should have a mass nationwide strike until they change the books to say that it's illegal to be testing biological weapons on us. I've read the law. It says it's illegal to do it unless, and it means that it's totally legal. Like, they're treating us like complete livestock. Like, this is ridiculous. What is wrong with us?
Well, what's wrong with us is that...
Why would we tolerate this? Why are we tolerating this?
Well, because the vast majority of Americans don't know what's going on. It's certainly not something that the corporate media is ever going to dare report. In fact, it took a lot of work to track down just how many times the U.S. government has gone ahead and tested biological weapons on American citizens. There are some examples that did get made public. Remember the Tuskegee syphilis study, where they infected these men and they just wanted to see what the disease would do if it was never treated. And they let these guys just sort of rot away, even after a cure for syphilis had been found. And it ended the whole idea of saying we need to know what happens in the extreme cases of the disease because there were no more extreme cases. There was a cure. And that's a classic example. And there was that incident over San Francisco. There was another one where they were dropping simulated anthrax into the New York subways. And this stuff goes on all the time. But most Americans don't know about it because the corporate media is keeping us distracted.
So the reason that we're not stopping it, the reason that we're not having mass protests is because we don't have enough percentage of the population aware of it. Okay, I understand that. And then the part of the population that is aware of it, we feel like we're too small to safely do something about it, that will just be picked off. I guess that's what the situation is. And we're just, we've been taken over by criminals, by mass murdering, pedophile, drug running, gun running, mafia, crime boss families. Like just like in Colombia, these narco drug families, it's the same thing except more sophisticated and like more well-dressed and more lies. That like if you came home and your house was just taken over by thugs, what are you going to do? Are you just going to like move into the basement suite? That's what we're doing. We recognize that our countries have been taken over, and it's not just the States. It's Canada. It's many countries are like this.
Yes.
We realize that we're being taken over by criminals, and we just sit down.
Well, we're taught, in school that a corrupt politician is an unusual occurrence, and we can rest assured that the system will work to deal with them, as they did in the case of Richard Nixon. But clearly, that's not the case, and we're seeing a demonstration of this right now, where now it's documented with written records that the FBI was interfering, was protecting Hillary during the email investigation. They were working to undermine, sabotage Congress oversight responsibilities, that's obstruction of justice. And so, yeah.
Because it's organized crime in our government. The FBI is organized crime.
Yes.
They're mass murdering, drug-running, gun-running criminals. They're guilty of conspiracies that would give them multiple consecutive hundreds and hundreds of years of life sentences if they were brought to justice for all these crimes they've been doing. Like, it's so frustrating.
Yes, it is. It's very frustrating. Okay.
So what is the solution?
My solution is to simply go on educating and informing people. And it's working. The audience numbers for the TV news media are in decline. The audience numbers for the independent media are continuing to grow. And that's why the government is trying to find some way they can just arbitrarily shut us all down and find a way around that First Amendment. And they've now co-opted the social media to impose censorship to keep certain things from getting out to the American people. But it really is not going to work because in the former Soviet Union, the Soviet citizens were educating themselves and sharing information with nothing more than fax machines. And push comes to shove, we would do exactly the same thing here. But they can't shut down the Internet completely because too much of our commerce depends on it.
People are aware of the 100th monkey, where the monkeys were washing their coconuts in these islands, and then all of a sudden a certain critical number of them were doing the same thing, and then all the monkeys on these different islands are washing their coconuts, and it's kind of a phenomenon called the 100th monkey. It's a similar analogy for a nuclear bomb where you have a critical mass, you have two separated amounts of the explosive, and you put them together, it reaches critical mass, it detonates. So hopefully with the education of the general public, like me and all your listeners, hopefully we're reaching a critical mass soon, which we could have a kind of unexpected, positive, very fast effect of a dramatic change for the better. So I do agree with you that the thing to do is to spread information, and so you're doing the best case scenario for the greater good that you could be doing, and we're helping you. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you very much, Michael. Have a great day.
Well, thank you very much, and certainly thank you for all the help in helping to spread this information out to other people, because you're right. At some point, there'll be a watershed moment where the American people are really going to wake on up and say, wow, this country is not what I was told it was when I was in school. It's not the country the TV news keeps telling me it is, and we're being lied to, and at some point that leads to the question, what do we do about it? Now again, I see as the best possible outcome a Soviet Union-style collapse of the central government. There's going to be a minimum of bloodshed with that. I certainly do not support the idea of an armed revolution or any kind of a civil war in the streets, because the American people really aren't prepared for it yet, and they're up against a government that can botch pretty much everything, but they're really, really good at killing people. It's like George Carlin says, what do we do around the world? We bomb brown people. Why do we do it? Because we're really good at it. All right, we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates just now rejoining the network, and we're going to go right back to the telephones to Andrea in Oklahoma. Aloha, Andrea. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael Rivera.
Aloha.
I contributed to the station of $100 that I couldn't afford, but and with the last caller, we've got it. The people that tune in need to be awakened. So, and they wouldn't be awakened if you're not there. My question is, because I don't know what bell or what light just went off, but the question is, do we have Israelis sitting in our Congress that are Israelis that has chosen to get a dual citizenship?
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, as I mentioned the other day, the irony is that in Israel, the Knesset does not allow dual citizens. You're either Israeli or you're not in there. But here in the U.S., the dual citizens are allowed all over. And if you criticize that, you're called an anti-Semite.
Well, the thing is, what other countries allow other countries to sit in on their Congresses?
I don't really have an answer for that, but I would imagine probably very few.
Okay, now, how can we put America first, second, and third if we have Israelis that are really only thinking about Israel and they're sitting in the U.S. Congress?
That is a problem. And when Trump was elected, a lot of us were thinking we might see the beginning of the weakening of Israel's influence, and unfortunately he has proven quite the opposite, that he is as much under the control of Israel as anybody else in the government.
Now, since you are somewhat, I don't know that you claim, you've said you are some Jewish there. But
I have Jewish ancestry. Rivero is a Sephardic name, but I don't have a religion.
Because 35 countries, if you say anything, I mean, because I was fired from my job back in 2016, October the 12th, because I was talking about 9/11 and Larry Silverstein and what really happened there, and I was fired because I was called an anti-Semite, and I don't know what's going on, but I haven't got a job since. So my $100 contribution means a lot to me. But anyhow, getting back to this, with people that are, they have two different things that they have as a religion. The Talmud goes right in, I mean, it has all those really odd things about being lustful and having sex with children as young as 2 years old, and that they won't remember it. How can we throw these Israelis out? Because that's exactly what Hitler did to bring the bread that was $1 million back down to normal. He got rid of the Jewish people in the banking system there, and then that's when they declared war on Germany. How could we avoid having war with these Israelis that are sitting in our Congress making laws? How can we do that without them coming down? And as you said, I think once, they have the right to push the button, the big one, the bombs.
Congress doesn't have that right. The deployment of nuclear weapons is under National Command Authority, and that's basically a very small select group who've got the code numbers to execute a launch. And they can launch following an attack. If they're going to launch the attack first, then they have what they call the two-man rule. And I remember one of Hillary's campaign claims during last year's election season was that Donald Trump, if he was elected president, could just start a nuclear war all by himself, and that is not true. Absent an actual strike on the U.S. itself, Donald Trump cannot order a nuclear strike. He would have to have one other person from National Command Authority agree with him.
Okay, the Donald Trump that ran for president could get up there and he made sense to the whole United States for enough of us to vote him in because we believed in him.
Yeah, well, we didn't get the Donald Trump we voted for. Anyway, Andrea, we got to do a commercial break. Thank you for your donation. It means as much to us as it does to you. And I hope you're able to find a job real soon. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And we're going to take a little stroll into political correctness fantasy land. And it's becoming silly. In fact, it's becoming a caricature of itself, which is usually the signal that the whole issue is about to just flame out. Because the way the PC people keep themselves in the eyes of the public is to keep coming up with more and more extreme things. Until finally everybody just says, this is nonsense. This is the shark. And here's a good one. Over at University College London, administrators were forced to apologize after a dreaming of a white campus tweet was deemed racist by the snowflake students. Now, the tweet had been intended to let students know the campus was still open, while some parts of Britain remained covered by 13 inches of snow. And the tweet simply said, dreaming of a white campus, our campuses will be open and operating fully Monday, the 11th of December, so please make your way in as planned. And this was responded to with a tweet that says, you know who else dreamt of a white campus? Hitler. That's who. It's disgusting. And apparently they added, if anyone doesn't understand why the comment is offensive, they should look into the history of the oppression of people of color. All right, well, I hate to be the one to break this to you. Snow is white. If the snow isn't white, it means somebody's been peeing into it, but that's another matter entirely. Snow is white. Nobody went on out and said, we're going to make the snow white to make it offensive to anybody. Snow is snow is snow is snow. And it really is getting ridiculous. Do you think they're going to be able to change the color of the snow? If you don't like the color of the snow, go on out and get some paint or something. But, I mean, talk about absolute ridiculous. And as I said in the first hour of the show, have you noticed these snowflakes? They're so bent out of shape at anything they find offensive, and yet they don't hesitate to dish back offensive language. It's a one-way system. You can't offend us. We're snowflakes. But we can certainly say nasty things about you because you're so offensive. Calling them Hitler, for example. All right, so let's talk about human-caused global warming, knowing that Britain is under 13 inches of snow. And earlier this year, the global warming cult came on out saying there had been a dramatic increase in the sea level of the Indian Ocean. Sorry, I had a little cough there. But a new study came on out, looked at the raw data, and found no increase in sea level. And basically said that these global warming activists' interpretation of the data was based on adjustments that seem completely arbitrary. They're still rigging the data. Now, because of the hard winter and because of that one major pipeline that is closed for repairs in the North Sea, Britain is going to ignore the sanctions against Russia, and basically they're going to approach Russia about oil and gas. And apparently a deal has been struck for a shipment of gas, liquefied natural gas, by the end of December. 170,000 cubic meters of liquefied natural gas carried by the Christophe de Margerie ice-class tanker, which is the first vessel of the Novatek-operated Yamal project in the Arctic, has been bought by a British energy company, and it's now heading to the Isle of Grain terminal in the UK. Now, that ice-class ship, back when everybody thought that the world really was warming and the Arctic really was shrinking, Russia invested in a fleet of cargo ships and tanker ships able to get through thin ice. That's what they mean by ice class. And they're all ready to go. They're all ready to go. Now, as we've mentioned earlier in the show a couple of times now, the FCC voted to repeal the Obama Internet rules guaranteeing equal treatment by ISPs for all their customers. And the repeal of the rules passed on a party line vote, 3-2. At one point, they had to leave the room. There were protesters outside, and apparently somebody phoned in a bomb threat, which turned out to be fake. But there was a lot of hostility on this issue, because despite the FCC chairman's comments about how this was going to restore the Internet to entrepreneurs and users and customers and take it out of the hands of those politicians, in reality, it is a giveaway to the major ISP companies so that they can prioritize traffic based on their own financial or political interests. And so this is a disaster for ordinary people. They're going to turn the Internet into just another corporate-controlled content delivery platform. We'll be back after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I was just watching the news feed. Fox is reporting on the FCC's decision to end net neutrality. The FCC is saying we're returning to the rules under which the Internet flourished prior to 2015. But even Fox News is saying what it really means is the big internet service companies like AT&T, Spectrum, and so forth now are free to throttle offerings from rival internet service companies. So in other words, what is going to happen is it's going to turn into like your cable TV company, where you're signed up for cable TV, all you can watch is what the cable TV company is programming. And if there's a movie out there you want to see that's on somebody else's system, you can't get at it. And that's what's going to happen here to the Internet. So all in all, I think it was a very bad idea. I support the common carrier concept, and it should have applied here. It did apply here originally. Now then, article coming out of the Daily Bell talking about how online deception is not about the Russians. Remember, we reported yesterday that after all the screaming about how Russia influenced the Brexit vote, they found a total of something like 70 cents worth of ads that were seen by maybe 200 people. Okay. But this article is basically talking about online deception is the province of government. And the government have paid agents as trolls online to divide and confuse, to hurl insults, to plant ridiculously silly stories, to try and discredit the Internet as a reliable source of information. They're still out there pushing this flat earth nonsense, and that's all it really is. And they're trying to make it look like people who are on the Internet are actually believing that the earth is flat. That's how desperate that they are getting, along with claims that the Apollo landings were faked and who knows what all else nonsense they're coming up with. But when you're online, or for that matter, even some of the callers into this show who are insulting or who are trying to say things that are provocative, they're working for these propaganda operations. So you have to keep an eye out for that. Not everybody that you meet on the Internet is a good person. Some of them work for the government. Now, once again, consumer rights groups are sounding a warning over some of these Internet-linked toys that are out there with built-in webcams, and warning that in many cases, hackers are able to seize control of these toys and tap into the video streams and microphones. And the problem appears to be that these Wi-Fi and Bluetooth-enabled toys are vulnerable to attack because they have their own hotspot with no security or privacy settings. Now, your phone, your laptop, tablet, your router, they have options where you can set a password for the user to secure their device. The toys don't, leaving them vulnerable to anybody who wants to log in remotely, turning them into a pedophile spy cam, for example. The toys tested were the Q50 Smart Tracking Watch, Mass Effect Andromeda Nomad ND1 RC car, the Sky Viper V2400 high-def streaming drone, the Air Hogs FPV high-speed race car, Cognitoy's Dino, and the Star Wars BB-8 droid. So you've got to be very, very careful about how and where your children are going to use these devices. And it's not just children who have to worry, because Consumer Watchdog is out there saying that personal digital assistants are going to be spying on you as well. And the two they're talking about are Amazon's Echo and Google Home, which are two of the biggest sellers this holiday season. But Consumer Watchdog is warning the public after obtaining documents that reveal the company's future plans. And apparently, Consumer Watchdog revealed they had obtained patent applications for the Amazon Echo and Google Home, which reveal the company's plan to keep tabs on you and your kids and sell the information about you to advertisers. Because these devices are listening all the time. They'll respond when you call their name, but they're listening all the time in order to hear their name. And apparently they're collecting this information. What you talk about near these devices, or what your children talk about near these devices, is being copied on off and sent off to the computers, ostensibly to be sold to marketing companies, advertisers. But along the way, you have to presume that the government will also be tapping into that feed as well. Because once that digital signal is outside your home, legally you're not considered to have a right to privacy. It's carrying forward on the idea of cordless telephones. Before the advent of cellular telephones, there were telephones in your home that were cordless. And by the way, I notice more and more that home phones are being provided with cordless headsets, which are convenient. You can walk around. But the reality is that you don't have a right to privacy. The courts have ruled if you're on a cordless telephone and that radio signal is escaping your property, it can be intercepted and used for evidence without a warrant. So just something to keep in mind. All right, let's grab ourselves a phone call. Tom in Florida, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Tom, are you there? Tom, I'm not hearing Tom. All right, so let's go back to the news here then. Apparently,
Michael?
Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, well, you're on the air. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Michael, I'm glad you brought up the net neutrality because that's one of the reasons I was going to call you, find out what you think about it, and I'm glad you straightened me out on that. Because I really didn't know too much about it other than what you had just said about net neutrality, so I'm glad you kind of straightened that out. The reason I am calling you, though, other than that, is the fact of the matter, I was watching TV here in South Florida, and they're having this thing now with this TPS for all these different groups who are like Haitians and all that. And they got all these Hispanics speaking in Spanish that, they don't want them to go back. They all want Trump to leave all these people here now that their country's been straightened out and Trump wants to get rid of it. They don't want to go back. The same like what's going to happen with DACA, Michael. They're not going back. They're going to probably let all these people eventually be voters in the next 2-3 years. They're going to be voting. They're going to be voting Democrat. It's all a ploy. It's all a conspiracy. And by the way, Michael, one more thing I want to bring up to you, and then I'll let you go. I got a few things, but the Matt Drudge, I'm not having. What do you think about Matt Drudge, Michael?
Well, I don't pay all that much attention to him. When I was first starting out as a blogger back in the days of Vince Foster, I was a regular contributor and we were friends. And then, unfortunately, we sort of crossed purposes when I was looking at that FBI cover-up of Vince Foster's murder, and I found the evidence that they had fraudulently manufactured the testimony of Lisa Foster, claiming that she recognized the gun found with the body. And in the FBI's own paperwork, I discovered they had substituted guns. They'd switched guns in order to get Lisa Foster to say, I recognize that gun, and that went on to become part of the official story. And I tried to share that with Matt Drudge, and he wouldn't touch the story. And instead he went with this other story about how Stephanopoulos was abusing his wife. Stephanopoulos sued him, and that made Matt Drudge a household name across America. He even got a TV show out of it, and Stephanopoulos down the road simply dropped the lawsuit. So basically it looked like it was a ploy for publicity, but Drudge wouldn't touch the story about the silver black gun, even though it's backed up by the official FBI paperwork. So I know he puts out a lot of good stuff there, but what he's putting on out is available at a lot of other websites, including my own. So I tend not to pay a lot of attention to him.
Well, I agree with you, Michael. And I got to say this, during the election of Moore and Jones, that night, Drudge report, he had like a rebel flag on there on his site. It was like, I guess it was a state of Alabama flag or whatever it was, but he was trying to make it like a Confederacy. And then all the way up till like the last 5 minutes of what he called that election, he has Moore winning. And then if you look at it, then I turned my phone off and I turned it back on 5 minutes to see his thing, just to see what was going on. And then all of a sudden it says Jones wins Alabama.
Yes.
And I'm like, this guy played this like a fiddle. He was pumping everybody into watching his little election night result. And eventually it was like a big plan that was already planned out. It was just amazing to me how and I've heard other stories about Drudge. He's very wishy-washy. So and you straighten me out on that now, too. So, and one more thing, Michael, about immigration. I really want to know, in your opinion, are they going to start rounding up some of these mayors that are having these sanctuary cities and arrest them? You said, I guess, one night. What do you really think about that?
It doesn't seem to be happening. It should have happened long before now under Title VIII. Again, I'm very disappointed in Donald Trump. We did not get the Donald Trump we thought we were voting into office. And it's very frustrating. Election after election after election, we'll vote for a candidate who's promising a change, and yet the core policies of the U.S. government remain completely unchanged. More war, more poverty for the people, more immigration, more refugees, more decline of our infrastructure. Nothing has really changed. And so I'm very disappointed in Donald Trump.
Well, I'm starting to feel you on that, Michael, and I hear that too. But I just got to say this. I saw this congressman here from Florida, Matt Guys, and he's talking. He's going to have a pretty strong bill out there with this sanctuary city. He's going to be co-sponsored, I guess, with that guy from with the guy from Indiana. I can't remember his name right now. But they're going to have a bill out, and it's going to be pretty powerful. That's what I'm reading when I'm hearing, they're getting ready to do here in January with this bill, because now they're going to shut the government down, and I don't know, this Rubio, little shorthand Rubio, I think he might stab the Republicans in the back again, just like Lane Brain McCain did with Obamacare. So we'll see. I don't even know if this tax thing is going to get passed on. Who knows? Who cares, I guess, in a way. But I do care, but I'm fed up. But I'm looking at a little what's going on with DACA. They're going to give them these people DACA. You watch, Michael.
Well, absolutely. The Democrats are fully on board with bringing in all these immigrants and refugees and making them citizens and making them Democratic voters. And maybe they don't even have to be citizens. We know that a lot of illegals did vote in last year's elections in the millions, and that's enough to swing an election. So, I mean, the system is broken. The entire our entire system of government is broken. It's under the control of a few very powerful individuals who are running roughshod not only over the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, but the American people and the people in all these countries that are being invaded and drone-struck and bombed.
Absolutely. And I tell you, Michael, you know what? You're going to see in the next 10 years, you're going to see Spanish probably as official language in the United States, because they're going to be so powerful. And there's of all the ethnic groups that ever came to this country, I think Germans are the most populous that ever came here. They don't allow the Germans to speak German in their household. You don't see 24 hours of newscasting in German. You don't see none of these high schools teaching their kids to speak German. Boy, do they teach them all over Florida and Texas and California to speak Spanish. It's amazing to me. That is just a total amazement. And the biggest ethnic group in this country are German Americans. Believe it or not, people came out of Germany.
Yes.
Unbelievable. And they're producing. They're producing. But who's allowed this is beyond belief what the kind of conspiracy this turned out to be. That is a big conspiracy, Michael. But, it's just unbelievable what's happened in the United States with immigration. They're not bringing the best and the brightest. They're bringing a bunch of no skilled. I mean, it's unbelievable what's happened in the United States. And that is going to get kicked in the phone right there.
I agree. We're not getting the best people from those source countries. We're getting the worst. And I'm sure these other countries are perfectly happy to get rid of these people and send them over to the United States of America. When there was that brief period where the U.S. decided to allow Cubans to migrate to the United States, Castro went down to the prisons, put them all on boats, and said, go 90 miles that way. And that's one of the reasons why Florida descended into such a horrible crime problem following that.
Michael, I witnessed the whole thing. I saw what happened to Dade in Broward County. It was horrific. The crime. We had 2,300 murders in 1 year in '83. You can archive it. You can archive that up. In 1983, there's 2,300 murders in South Florida. It was off the chart, and there were so many robberies, crime. Well, they made Scarface, but that was a fictional bunch of crap. But it was that ruthless. I mean, it was insane. It was insane what was going on in South Florida during that time. And Castro, absolutely, you're right. He dumped his criminals. He flooded this place with I believe it was 68,000 criminals were released out of Cuba at that time. A lot of them went to Mississippi. They were catching them, they'd ship them more to Mississippi and all those prisons over there on the Gulf Coast over there. It was just horrific what was going on for like a 5-year period. It was unbelievable. And like again, we don't have no immigration policies. It's all went nuts since 1965. And nobody wants to address it. Even Trump, like you said, he's turning a blind eye to it. It's crazy.
All he's done so far is build up demonstration test platforms of a couple of wall designs, and what he should have done was laid down the law to all these mayors and governors of these sanctuary cities and sanctuary states and said, you're violating Title VIII. And the amount of jail time, if you look at every single sheltered illegal immigrant as a count, and you look at the jail penalty per count, you're looking at life sentences for these guys.
Well, yeah, Michael, and one more thing I want maybe you to read. I researched this. I don't know if it's really true. I've seen it on a couple of websites. I know it was Patriot, but I can't remember. There's over 100,000 illegal gang members in Los Angeles alone.
Yes.
LA's got 100,000 gang members. If that's true, that's more than a battalion. That's bigger than battalions they got in the National Guard over there.
Well, MS-13 is one of the most violent gangs out there, and they're flooding into the United States right now. It's
horrific. And not only talking about the gang problem in Chicago and all these cities, it's nothing. I mean, I don't know what Trump is doing. I agree. Why don't he? Okay, look, you guys are going to be arrested. You sanctuary mayors, you Governor Brown, you're going to get arrested. You're breaking Title VIII. You're gone. You're going to jail. And the day I see that, I can turn the news on and see that, I won't believe anything this government tells me until I see that happen. You know, to me, it's all a big scam. Well, and you talk about Weiner, this guy Weiner and Uma Abedin. Nothing happened to them. You Lois Lerner, nothing happened to her. Here she's going after hundreds of thousands of patriots whose families have been, like I said, I told you the other night, this Lois Lerner, she pleads the fifth. She should be in prison. They should lock her up and throw the key away when she's done the patriot movement with the IRS. That was insanity.
Yeah, it was.
They're sitting there, people on IRS.
And we were all hoping that Trump meant it when he said draining the swamp, but unfortunately he's hired most of the alligators to be his White House staff. Tom, we're going to have to let you go. We've got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with the last segment of our program today after these few words. Aloha America, welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today, and we're going to take another phone call. Andy in Texas. Aloha, Andy. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Hey, I'm sure you know who Josh Tolley is, right?
I've heard the name, yes.
Yeah, he's from the GCN network. He's on 9 to 11. Anyway, he's been talking about something that NASA's aware of, that there's some sort of phenomenon in the sky right now that they're actually speculating might be some sort of spaceship. He's even gone as far as to say that they have reports from NASA of some sort that perhaps the ship is tootling around in the universe here with like an engine is broke or something. So have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, it's what it was. It was discovered to be some kind of an asteroid or object right here at the observatories in Hawaii, and that's why it's named Oumuamua, which means messenger. Its official name is A2017UI, and the reason it's attracted attention is because it's extremely elongated. Most asteroid objects tend to be more or less spherical. This one is very long and thin. It's like a 10-to-1 ratio. And from its speed and trajectory, it's obvious that it came from outside the solar system, and it's headed on its way back out. But everyone was saying, well, this object can't exist naturally. It must be an alien spaceship, and everybody's sort of caught up with it. And it's been given star power because Stephen Hawking is now out there saying it could be some kind of an alien probe. Personally, I would prefer to wait until a lot more data was collected on it. But again, we know that there are going to be alien civilizations out there, and someday something may be coming through. As I've said before, I can't imagine what they would find of interest on our planet to bother stopping and looking at us. But again, they don't have any clear images of it. They've simply inferred its dimensions and its axis of rotation photometrically. So I think the one thing we can safely say that we know is that we don't really know, but it's fun to speculate. And I'm sure that if Arthur C. Clarke was still with us, he'd be jumping for joy, because I imagine sales of his book, Rendezvous with Rama, are going to take off, because that was the storyline of that book. Alien probe that comes through our solar system and is heading on out the other side.
Hey, you know, Mike, what's really funny is that you're right. What would an alien life form want to come here for? All they have to do is monitor us for a second, and next thing they know, these people are living a useless life. You guys are just going in circles here. Endless wars. I mean.
Well, it's like
Yeah,
I said
right,
before.
right.
When you drive down the highway, do you stop at every anthill that you pass? And the answer is no. You don't really have all that much concern with the ants. You're just trying to get down to the supermarket or whatever. Okay, well, there's the music. Andy, I got to let you go. We're at the end of the program. I apologize to our remaining caller. We weren't able to fit you in today here. So please stay tuned to the John Stedmiller program. He's got a lot of interesting things to share with you. And I ask all of you to please share what you learn here with your social media, with your email, with your friends. We're in a fight to get the truth out there against this tsunami of lies, and we need your help. And also thanks to everybody who's been donating to Republic Broadcasting. I understand that some of you are chipping on in, and we need the rest of you to do that and help us fill up the stockings, Christmas stockings, of our overworked and underpaid technical staff. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.